America in the 1800s was a nation of stark contrasts. It was a young nation full of promise and opportunity. Yet it was also a nation deeply divided. At the heart of this division was the issue of slavery. The South relied on enslaved Africans for labor on its vast cotton plantations. The North, with its growing industries, increasingly viewed slavery as morally wrong. This fundamental difference in values fueled a growing sectionalism. Southerners fiercely defended their way of life, invoking the principle of states' rights. They argued that the federal government had no right to interfere with their peculiar institution. Northerners, led by abolitionists like Frederick Douglass and Harriet Tubman, condemned slavery as a moral abomination. They demanded its abolition. Adding fuel to the fire were economic differences. The South remained largely agricultural, dependent on cotton exports to Europe. The North, experiencing an industrial revolution, sought to expand its markets and influence. These economic disparities created resentment and mistrust between the two regions. By the mid-19th century, these simmering tensions reached a boiling point. The nation was on a collision course, hurtling towards a war that would test its very soul. The question was not if, but when and how, this conflict would erupt. The election of 1860 proved to be the spark that ignited the flames of war. Abraham Lincoln, a Republican who campaigned on a platform of preventing the expansion of slavery, was elected president. His victory sent shockwaves through the South. Southern states, fearing that Lincoln's election signaled the end of their way of life, began to secede from the Union. On April 12, 1861, Confederate forces fired on Fort Sumter in Charleston, South Carolina. The Civil War had begun. What started as a conflict over slavery quickly evolved into a fight for the very survival of the nation. The North fought to preserve the Union, while the South fought for independence and the right to self-determination. As the war raged on, its purpose evolved. In 1863, President Lincoln issued the Emancipation Proclamation. This landmark document declared that all slaves held in Confederate territory were to be freed. The Emancipation Proclamation transformed the war from a struggle to preserve the Union into a crusade for human freedom. The Civil War was a brutal and bloody conflict. Battlefields across the nation were stained with the blood of young men, both North and South. One such battle, fought in the small town of Gettysburg, Pennsylvania, in July 1863, would prove to be a turning point in the war. For 3 days, Union and Confederate armies clashed in a ferocious battle that left over 50,000 casualties. In the end, the Union Army emerged victorious, repelling Robert E. Lee's Confederate forces and crushing their hopes for a decisive victory in the North. Gettysburg was a turning point in the war, but it came at a terrible cost. The human toll of the battle shocked the nation. President Lincoln, deeply moved by the sacrifices made at Gettysburg, delivered his immortal Gettysburg Address, dedicating the battlefield as a final resting place for the fallen, and urging the nation to fulfill the promise of a new birth of freedom. Section 4. A House Reunited, Appomattox and the Dawn of Reconstruction. The tide of the war had turned. The North, with its superior industrial might and manpower, began to wear down the Confederacy. General Ulysses S. Grant, Lincoln's steadfast commander, relentlessly pursued Lee's army through Virginia. On April 9, 1865, at Appomattox Courthouse, Lee surrendered his army to Grant. The war was over. The news of Lee's surrender spread like wildfire across the war-torn nation. Church bells rang out, and people danced in the streets. After 4 long years of bloodshed and division, the Union was preserved. But the work of rebuilding the nation had just begun. The South lay in ruins, its economy shattered, its society in upheaval. The period following the Civil War, known as Reconstruction, was a time of great hope and even greater challenges. Section 5. The Enduring Legacy, Reflections on a Nation Forged by Fire. The American Civil War was a defining moment in the nation's history. It was a time of great tragedy and profound transformation. The war ended slavery, but it also left a legacy of racial division and inequality that continues to this day. The 13th Amendment to the Constitution, ratified in 1865, abolished slavery in the United States. This was a monumental achievement, a testament to the sacrifices made by countless individuals who fought for freedom. Yet, the road to equality was long and arduous. The Civil War may have ended slavery, but it did not end racism. The struggle for civil rights, for equal opportunity, for true justice, continues. As we reflect on the legacy of the Civil War, let us remember the words of Abraham Lincoln, who called upon the nation to bind up the nation's wounds and to create a just and lasting peace. Let us honor the sacrifices of those who fought and died in this great conflict by striving to create a more perfect union, a nation where all citizens are treated with dignity, respect, and equality. The Civil War serves as a stark reminder of the fragility of democracy and the importance of unity, tolerance, and understanding. It is a story that continues to shape our nation, challenging us to confront our past and to build a more just and equitable future for all.